Hello everybody and welcome to another official Tribal Wars video tutorial. I'm Marshy from the international community, and in this video we're going to be covering build orders and troop compositions. When you first start, there will be tutorials in the upper left hand corner of the game here. You're going to want to follow the tutorials fairly closely, mostly because the rewards on the quests are going to benefit you more than taking on your own custom start. The quests do end fairly early point wise, so as you finish them up, you're going to want to start leveling your resources and creating spearmen if you are on a world that has scavenging. If you are a returning or new player, spearmen are the most efficient unit to use when scavenging, so you will have a small defensive army as well as another alternative way of getting resources. Before covering a build strategy, I did want to just say this is very situational. Think of this method as a foundation to your build strategy and mold it to your playstyle as you learn. You'll learn that every world you play will be a little different. For example, if you're getting attacked or falling behind the players in your area, you may want to take more of a defensive route to protect yourself because they will have an academy before you. On the other hand, if you're outgrowing people in the area, it's fairly safe to take a more aggressive approach and go offensive to farm villages and players more efficiently, which will allow you to grow faster. And then kind of going through the buildings one by one here, barracks level is actually going to depend on how many resources you're actually pulling in. You need to be able to try and keep the barracks running as well as the headquarters running at all time. So if the headquarters is running and so is the barracks, what you can do is you can actually level up the barracks a little bit so that you're producing more troops while everything is actually still running. If you have watchtowers, that's actually going to completely be super situational. As you get more villages, you're going to actually have a watchtower village that's going to oversee your other villages. Your market level's probably going to go along with your academy and when it's going to be required to build, unless you are trading a lot of resources or need it for the premium exchange. The farm is going to be completely depending on the actual population. Right up here you can see as it starts to fill up or get a little bit closer to filling up, you're always going to want to keep up on the levels for that. The warehouse is going to also depend on how many resources you're actually pulling in. You want to make sure that your warehouse isn't filling up in any less than 8 to 9 hours. That way if you have to sleep, you can make sure that you aren't just losing resources while you're sleeping. The hiding place isn't something I normally level up. I'll actually usually remove the levels when I get the village full build. And then for the wall, I usually keep that relatively high because if you do need support from tribe members, typically they're going to be a lot happier to send their troops to a village that has a higher level wall rather than you having a level 5 wall and tons of troops that are just going to get deleted because they don't have the extra defense boost. Your entire village will build fairly gradually all around, so really take into consideration your current situation and how that should affect what you build next. The main buildings that you should be focusing on are going to be the resource pits, the barracks, the headquarters, and smithy. First thing after completing quests, I normally suggest going after resource levels and the stable. Oftentimes my resources levels are anywhere from 12 to 15 when I'm getting light cavalry researched. While creating these buildings, it's important to use the market to buy and sell resources to make sure you don't end up with a warehouse full of one single resource. So you just select the market, click create offers, and from this page you can create an offer, select what you are willing to get rid of and what you want, and be sure to check the actual resources. Especially in the early parts of the game, you can have a lot of iron and not enough wood or clay, especially if you are creating those spear fighters. So being able to exchange that iron for a resource that you need just a little bit more can help benefit you a lot. I usually have the iron mine a level or 2 behind the other resource pits until I research light cavalry. As you're farming the local villages, you'll start to find how good the farming is in your local area. If you're sending troops out and you're pulling in decent amounts of resources, rushing light cavalry may be a good option to take advantage of the situation. If you're only getting 0 to 3 resource hauls, then getting an extra few levels on the resource pits and building more spear fighters may be a good alternative. The way I determine if I'm ready for the next building or troop research is by asking myself the question, did I have to wait all day to get these resources? If the answer is yes, then it's probably better just to focus on troops and resource levels. As far as building troops, you want to try and have roughly 1.5 to 2 troops per point. I would usually keep this in mind as you approach the 500 point area, but I would not get stuck on that concept before that. To see what your ratio is, you just go into your farm, and then right here you can actually see all of the troops that you have in total. So this will show troops that are in production and troops that are completed. Keep in mind that some troop, like light cavalry, will count for 4 units and a axeman will count as 1 unit. When working on your army and you are in a scavenging world, you're going to want to start off with about 300 plus spear fighters producing light cavalry as soon as possible. This will allow you to farm and scavenge more resources very productively. In doing this, you start to snowball and jumpstart your growth. When deciding other troops to build, I always say it depends mostly on your activity. Keep in mind that if you are in a world that doesn't have scavenging, then it's likely better to just go for the light cavalry early if you are going for an offensive start. In my opinion, it is best to go offensive because you can grow a lot faster, but as I mentioned before, if you don't have a lot of time to play the game, then a defensive army is safer because if you get attacked while you sleep, you can make more of a dent in your attacker's army. Using a mixed army, excluding the spears in your first village, isn't something I would recommend. If you have a mixed army, then you're left with an offensive army that isn't big enough to clear a village, and a defensive army that isn't big enough to defend an attack. While deciding on a final army, it's always good to run some simulations in the rally point. In doing this, you can figure out which builds you prefer fighting a specific army. Keep in the consideration that sometimes keeping a stable and barracks running equally to complete your army at the fastest rate possible is sometimes the best option. So I do have a couple example armies built right here. So for the offensive armies, I typically have somewhere around 6,200 axe, 2,600 light cavalry, 250 rams, and 50 catapults at a full build. If it's a world that has mounted archers, I typically will add a few hundred of them in as well and replace them out with some of the other units. As for defensive villages, I normally just build whatever completes the fastest. The reason I do that is because it takes a lot longer to complete a full defensive army than an offensive army. A rough idea on troops for a defensive army would be about 8,000 spearmen, 4,000 sword, and 500 plus heavy cavalry. Once again, if this is an archer world, I may put a few thousand archers into the build as well. The ultimate goal here is to be able to have the barracks, stable, headquarters, all running at the same time. If you're able to farm, scavenge, and plunder villages to be able to accomplish this, there's no doubt in my mind that you'll be well on your way to the top. Hopefully you found this video helpful and it helps you decide your village build and troop compositions, and thank you for watching.